Multiple sources reported late last night that Netflix has won over the board at Warner Bros. Discovery and will start a window of exclusive negotiations to buy the studio. While this does not mean that a sale is final or even imminent, it does mean that Netflix, for now, is the victor of this three-company bidding war, and they will now be the only potential buyer allowed to negotiate a deal with Warner Bros. Discovery. However, those talks could still result in a deal not being reached and the bidding process opening back up.
Let's keep in mind with everything we're going to talk about, whenever Disney purchased Fox, that took a year and a half for that entire process to go through. That's the whole government looking in on it, seeing about if it's fair, does it hurt the industry, getting everything else finalized. So even what we're talking about here, we're not going to see any of it come to fruition until at least a year and a half.
This is something that could affect hundreds of millions of television viewers all around the world, because everybody now is a streamer in one way or another, and most people are glued to Netflix already. HBO Max, one of the other big streaming platforms, would be coming together with Netflix if this deal is consummated. And if it goes through, if regulators do approve this, it would bring together two big streaming platforms, and it would give Netflix access to some of the most valuable intellectual property on the planet. You know, brands like Batman and Game of Thrones and Harry Potter. So this is a deal that will ultimately affect many consumers, but it's a long way from actually taking effect.
Netflix's offer is not for all of Warner Bros. Discovery. They're interested in negotiating to buy the Warner Bros. Movie studio and HBO Max. WB Discovery's cable networks will reportedly still be spun off into its own entity if this deal goes through, and perhaps still bought by somebody else, including Paramount Skydance. Bloomberg also reported that Netflix has put up a $5 billion breakup fee to be paid to Warner Bros. Discovery if this deal does not close.
Does that now mean every Warner Brother movie that gets released in the future will now be a straight to streaming exclusive for Netflix? Doesn't look like it right now. Netflix did put out a statement kind of giving the gist and an idea of their plans with Warner Brothers right now, and they say they are still committed to the theatrical release. In fact, reports are saying that they're going to keep David Zaslav as CEO and that they would run Warner Brothers separately from Netflix. And that did make a lot of people go, okay, so then what the heck was the point of this bid and all that? It's all the IPs, it's the library of content. I mean, that's really what Netflix is gaining, and that's also what they've been struggling with since they came to fruition. I mean, if you really think about it, how many like straight up Netflix properties can you think of? You know, like Stranger Things, Squid Games, maybe K-pop Demon Hunter? Netflix has had a real identity crisis where they don't have strong IP that they can constantly churn out like a movie studio does, where Warner Brothers constantly turns to DC and makes Batman movies nonstop. They own the Harry Potter movies, Cartoon Network properties and stuff like that. All that is now content they can stuff onto Netflix, whether new or old, and that'll be enough for them to raise them prices over and over.
What might be even crazier than the heavy hitters like a Harry Potter, DC, Lord of the Rings is all the classic franchises and characters they have access to now, like Tom and Jerry, Scooby-Doo. All of Cartoon Network are now owned by Netflix. Things like Ben 10, that means. And I'm not going to read this entire list because there's too much to list, but they own so many things now, like the Matrix franchise, Mad Max, Adult Swim, Casablanca, Citizen Kane, The Goonies. They now own Game of Thrones and a Minecraft movie's film rights. That movie just made $1 billion earlier this year. The original rights for The Wizard of Oz, the Dune franchise, the Monsterverse series, like I said, Warner Brothers Games, which includes Hogwarts Legacy. And they got all this for $82 billion because Warner Brothers was in an insane amount of debt. In comparison, Disney ended up buying Fox for $71 billion, which obviously gave them a ton of content too, but I feel like Netflix definitely got the better deal here. And I'm going to talk about the whole movie theater portion of this in a second, but first I want to say no matter what happens with films staying in theaters or not, this is going to be worse for us, the end user and consumers. When you eliminate competition like this, there is now no longer any incentive for them to lower prices or offer better products for us because they own pretty much over half of the entire streaming industry and some of the most famous characters and properties of all time.
We've already had a senator make a comment about it. Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts saying here, this deal looks like an anti-monopoly nightmare. The senator said in a statement Friday, a Netflix Warner Brothers would create one massive media giant with control of close to half the streaming market, threatening to force Americans into higher subscription prices and fewer choices over what and how they watch, while putting American workers at risk. Because look, I also get on the other side of that. If you're not a big movie nerd and you just think about your coworker who's living their regular lives and doesn't know much about movies, because hey, we are in our little movie bubble. To them, they might see Warner Bros. And Netflix getting together as a great thing. They're like, oh, good. Now I don't really have to go to the movie theaters for another studio. It'll just be there on my comfy couch. I don't mind if they charge me $2 or $3 more. At least then I don't have to go to a sticky movie theater, purchase expensive popcorn, deal with large crowds and annoying people. To them, it seems favorable, but it is dangerous because, like they're saying, they would own half the market. With that, they would have so much power and raise prices. There could be a future where we're honestly paying $80 for Netflix, which you laugh now, but it's not going to be so funny in like 5 years when we're close to that price. They also mentioned the risk of fewer workers. Now that it's just one company running things and not multiple, well, there are going to be fewer movies and fewer TV shows made because they can only focus on so many things at once. And when fewer things are made, fewer people get hired, fewer people get jobs, and that has a domino effect on the economy. I don't know, man. There's so many questions up in the air about what's going on. I just hope Netflix realizes movie theaters and streaming should be a symbiotic relationship. I don't think they should rival each other or that Netflix should be trying to kill the other one the same way they did Blockbuster, which kind of crazy how much Netflix has gone since them Blockbuster days, RIP. Because studies have proven movies that go to theaters and then eventually on streaming perform way better. People tend to watch them more, and that's only a benefit for their platform. You eliminate that movie theater model or that premium feel that it's like, oh, a movie that I could only watch if I went outside my house is now available kind of for free at the comfort of my home. I say for free, but people, you know, are paying their monthly subscription. But it feels free at the time because you could just click it. That's a value that Netflix is now trying to cut away and shoot themselves in the foot with. I hope Netflix kind of uses Warner Brothers to more market their films or make them feel more like events.
One major outstanding question, and one that we may not know the answer to for some time, is what Netflix's strategy regarding theatrical releases for Warner Brothers films is going to be. Thus far, Netflix is only committed reportedly to honoring existing contracts for theatrical release. However, unless Ted Sarandos has some kind of Ebenezer Scrooge moment, I don't see him all of a sudden embracing movie releases with full, robust theatrical windows. At best, I see Warner Brothers releases getting even shorter theatrical windows, and I think it's likely you can probably kiss physical media for WB movies goodbye as well. There are lots of points in this deal that are debatable, or this potential deal, but I think it's unquestionable that if it goes through, this will be something between a major setback and an absolute disaster for movie theaters and for movie fans like me who still enjoy seeing movies on the big screen.
I really want to believe Netflix is being completely honest about them sticking to the theatrical release model, because this deal, a lot of people are panicking because it looks like the death of cinema. And even though recently Netflix has made some moves to like embrace theatrical more, like I know I was trying to get tickets for the final episode of Stranger Things, those things sold out in theaters so instantaneously. You're telling me that money Netflix is making from that isn't at least making them go, maybe there's something to this theatrical release. Same when they released K-pop Demon Hunters in theaters for a little bit. So I want to believe them that they are going to commit to the theatrical model, but there is a statement they made in their release that makes me go, ooh, see there's the red flag. Ted Sarandos, the CEO of Netflix, made this statement saying, my pushback has been mostly in the fact of the long exclusive windows, which we don't really think are that consumer friendly. And it's so funny he says that because I mean, ever since streaming or COVID, the release window for movies in theaters has gotten shorter and shorter. It used to be a 90-day window. A movie would be there and it'd be exclusively in theaters for at least 90 days. That window has now gone down to 30, and a lot less if the movie just doesn't perform well. It'll be on streaming within like 3 weeks. And that's what the Netflix CEO here is mentioning here, is that he's gonna still continue to work on a friendly window release for audiences, which could mean we could see a future where, yeah, Warner Brother movies still go to theaters, but they're there for like 2 weekends, and if you didn't see it, well, you catch it on Netflix.
What's in it for Netflix? Well, they buy a big rival. They get access to the studio production facilities. Netflix at the moment, it relies on external producers a great deal to produce the vast amount of content that it commissions and streams every year. So it gets that, and it gets access to that library, very valuable library. Television shows like Friends, which is due to drop off by the end of this year, the Netflix platform. So it gets that. For Warner Brothers, it's an acknowledgement here of this changing industry where these studios once controlled access to content. It's now streamers who control it, because we want this stuff at home. And it's the consolidation of this industry, because scale is everything. We've seen it in several moves. We're seeing it potentially here in the UK, but this is Netflix really becoming a giant. Now, this deal will need regulatory approval in the United States because it brings together two of the biggest streaming platforms. What regulation looks like in the US at the moment, given the way Donald Trump seeks to leverage his power in business deals, remains to be seen. But both sides sound confident they'll get a deal done. And this poses questions for the remaining big rivals. There were two other big companies, Paramount, Skydance, and Comcast, ultimate owners of Sky, which owns Sky News, also wanted to buy Warner Brothers. They've lost out. They're now going to see if this deal goes through. An enormous powerhouse now based a little further north than Los Angeles in California, but have a huge control and impact over what we watch all around the world.
I think this potential deal should be given heavy regulatory oversight because I think that it is legitimately anti-competitive. However, I think it will get scrutinized in order to try to tip the scale towards Paramount, especially if this deal falls through, who would not get the same level of scrutiny, and that isn't right. However, politicians and the Ellisons are not the only ones who are lobbying against a potential Netflix deal. Perhaps sensing that this was coming, a group of film producers sent an email to members of both political parties in the US asking them to oppose the deal or a potential deal and to give this acquisition, quote, the highest level of scrutiny, unquote. Variety, who reported the existence of this email, cited sources saying that the group included a number of prominent filmmakers, though the email itself was unsigned as the filmmakers reportedly feared retribution from Netflix given the company's size. Perhaps it's about to get even bigger. The rationale behind opposition to this deal from these filmmakers was that a Netflix merger would, quote, effectively hold a noose around the theatrical marketplace, end quote, and Variety's reporting stated that one Netflix strategy would involve theatrical windows for Warner Brothers films as short as 2 weeks, though other sources disputed that claim, saying that the window would be longer than that.
I even want to bring up something James Cameron has lately been saying about Netflix, where he doesn't think Netflix movies should be considered for Oscar potential. He said he says Netflix buying Warner Brothers would be a disaster, and it's a sucker bait to think they will commit to full theatrical release. We will put the movie out for a week. We will qualify for the Academy Awards. I think that's fundamentally rotten at its core. The Oscars mean nothing to me if they don't mean theatrical. Netflix should be allowed to compete if they put out a movie for a meaningful release in 2,000 theaters for a month. And honestly, I'm kind of agreeing here with what James Cameron said. There is a rule in the Oscars where as long as you release a movie in theaters for 1 week in either New York and LA, only those two markets, then you qualify for the Oscars. And Netflix has abused that rule a lot. If the Academy wants to save movie theaters and keep theaters running, I think a rule like this, the movie must have a wider release for a longer time. I think that's the way to go. But then it's a double-edged sword, because then you think about the indie movies with barely a budget, barely trying to get by, who can only afford to be in a couple of markets. Well, then they're going to get hurt by that change.
So we have a growing list of opponents to this deal, and if its number one opponent, David Ellison, is looking for allies, he doesn't really have to lobby the White House to gain their support. He has openly had that support from the beginning, and unless something major changes, Netflix is almost certainly facing an uphill regulatory battle against an administration that will likely try everything it can to torpedo this deal. In other words, strap in, folks, because this is going to get ugly.